Hey everyone, welcome to Strange Stories, where we explore near-death experiences and supernatural stories from people who've had a glimpse of the other side. If you enjoy our content, please consider liking the video and subscribing to our channel. Without further ado, let's get to the story of the day. I was sitting on my bed, one foot on the floor, one on the bed. After leaving the hospital, I had barely been home for approximately 10 or 15 minutes. My many blinds were closed, but my bedroom's blackout curtains were open. I was also living alone in a 3-bedroom house at the time. I'd spent a couple of nights in the hospital with my mother earlier in the week and had returned home to pass some time and pay a few bills on my computer. I had paid a few other bills and was in the middle of confirming my Lowe's credit card payment when something spoke to me in what I can only describe as a psychic manner, like hearing without the sound entering my ears. The sound seemed to emanate from somewhere who was 1 or 2 miles distant, but inside the room at the same time. The sound, or source of the sound, also appeared to be directed, prompting me to look in what I later discovered was a northwest direction from my house. I then noticed something I can only describe as a vibrating point of extraordinarily bright light approaching me from more than a mile distant. Something resembling a doorway began to develop and gradually spread outward from the bright light in the center. It was similar to what a person sees when they are about to pass out and lose their peripheral vision. It was almost like having reverse tunnel vision. The surface layers of the doors and walls began to peel away, allowing me to view into the kitchen, then the dining room, and then through the left rear corner wall of the house to the sunlight and trees outside. While all of this was going on, the bright vibrating light was getting closer and larger, and the trees began to fade. The light was approaching me, and a telepathic voice addressed me as son in my mother's voice, but in a way I had never heard her voice before. My mother had a raspy voice due to 40 years of smoking 2 packs of Winston cigarettes every day. Her voice was clear and gentle, and she sounded more excited and happy than I'd ever heard her before. She had suffered from postpartum depression following my birth and had been depressed for the majority of my existence. Then something I can only describe as an out-of-body experience happened to me. I've been looking for ADC and OBE accounts since that day, but I've only found one that was nearly identical to mine. My consciousness appeared to be outside of my body, but still connected to it in some way. We were instantly in what appeared to be another realm, and entirely encircled by what appeared to be outer space darkness. But I couldn't see any other points of light, or anything than her spirit or light. Nothing else could be seen, heard, or felt by me. It was as if I were outside of my body, with no body to feel any of my 5 earthly senses. I was overwhelmed and surrounded by the greatest sensation of love I'd ever felt in that seemingly empty, black darkness with only my mother's light. In my entire life, I've never felt so deeply loved. If I added up all the love I've felt and received in my life, it would only be about 2% of the love that my spirit felt in that place or realm. It seemed as though I were being loved by what I can only describe as the great love. It was so beautiful that I wanted to stay there forever in that realm where there was no wrath, hatred, loneliness, fear, misery, agony, grief, or suffering. She was the happiest I'd ever seen her, as if all of her burdens had been removed. I don't recall everything she said to me in that room, but I do remember the most essential things she said to me. She said she was going back to where we all originated from. She said not to be sad for her because she was free of all the pain she had endured during her life. She promised that we'd all be together again eventually. She wanted to express her gratitude to me for forgiving her and loving her as much as I did during her existence. Then I felt like I was yanked out of the realm and pushed back into my body, as if I had just blinked my eyes for a few seconds. Then I noticed a brilliant light flashing through the other corner wall of my bedroom. Her spirit, or light, appeared to be traveling very quickly in a southeastern direction, and then it was gone. I began to doubt my own sanity and mental wellness. I was concerned that I might have schizophrenia, despite the fact that no one on either side of my family has ever had it. Then I tried to dismiss what had just happened, thinking it was all in my head. My mother was well and even smiling just before they took her back to the ICU for observation, and the doctor assured her that it wasn't anything severe. After that, I was torn because everything seemed so real. Whatever looked stupid and irrational at the moment. When I couldn't deny it, I became terrified that my mother had died in the hospital and that she had been able to say her final goodbyes. She transmitted some forbidden message about the afterlife to me, as if she was still there in a loving place. I started praying that no one would contact my phone before I returned to the hospital. But deep down, I knew there was no use in going back because she wasn't there anymore. I'd only find her body and my bereaved sisters. I felt terrible for my sisters, since they never got to forgive my mother or hear her truly heartfelt apology for what had occurred to them. I had a quarrel with my oldest sister the day before she died, and I attempted to convince her to postpone Mom's minor surgery since she wasn't strong enough to survive. She had suffered from a severe depression for several weeks and had stopped eating and taking her cardiac meds. She had a small stroke a week before. My mother's youngest kid and only son is me. My older sisters have never paid attention to me or followed my counsel. I was overjoyed when Mom survived the small surgery that morning, and they called us to the recovery area, proving my intuition wrong. My sisters were eating, laughing, and joking in the recovery room, but for some reason, I couldn't be as cheerful as they were. My entire focus was on Mom. I couldn't stop holding her hand, kissing her on the forehead, stroking her hair, and telling her how much I loved her. After they began to wheel my sister into the ICU for observation, she remained in the recovery room, but I stayed with her till I couldn't go anymore. For the last time that day, I kissed her and told her I loved her, not knowing she would die less than an hour later. It took me a few years to muster the bravery to discuss my ADC experience with anyone, and I've been doing it ever since, almost 16 years ago. I've probably only told 6 or 7 people about it. Since that October day, my life has been exceedingly difficult. I'm not sure if my encounter was the benefit or a curse. Within a month of my ADC, I began experiencing severe daily migraines and stroke-like symptoms, which lasted for the following 11 years. Doctors were unable to identify the source of the headaches or provide a treatment. Several more paranormal events occurred in that house over the next 11 years, but there was never another ADC or OBE. My father passed away approximately 5 years afterwards. At our local hospice, he was in my arms. While I was holding my dying father in my arms, there was a brief time when he was still alive in his body, and then he wasn't. While holding him, I felt the presence of his spirit and another being in the hospice room. The sensation was so powerful that I whirled around to see if I could see anything, and then they were both gone. It also seemed to open the door to more great and negative paranormal activities that I never expected to have. However, no further ADCs occurred when I was completely awake after that day, but I do have frequent vivid dreams about my father, in which we spent a lot of time together. These fantasies seem almost real. Some experiences, such as conversing with the dead, appear to violate universal, religious, and dimensional laws in some way. It's not something I tried to do or induced to happen on purpose. It appears that I was simply receptive to the experience or was invited to participate in it. It was not something I imagined was feasible until it happened. Time appears to move more slowly here. The entire encounter seemed to last around 10 minutes.